Hello, welcome to another podcast episode on CodeStories. The name of my guest is Michael. He is a backend engineer currently working here in Berlin. He studied electronic and electrical engineering in Nigeria, but his passion for technology, especially software engineering, was greater. We're going to talk about Michael's journey into tech, how he moved from Nigeria to Germany. We're going to talk about the state of software engineering, software development in Nigeria. Michael is also going to give us some insight into his work as a backend engineer. He's going to give some advice and suggestions for those of you who wants to dive into this field. Let's roll the podcast. Michael, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a huge pleasure.
You are welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. The weather is pretty hot today.
Yeah. Yes. So you're working from home, right? I guess.
Yes, still working from home.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how have your experience been since the whole pandemic thing started? And after you, working from home for such a long time, has it had any effect on you, or positive, negative?
Right. It's been a mix of both. On one hand, I get to work without the delays, commuting from home to the office every day. So I just wake up and get to work. And then the negative part of that is the fact that at times I overwork. So at some point it got really stressful. Also, I began to miss human interaction, right? I began to miss the part where I could sit with a colleague, with a teammate, right, and collaborate on something. I miss that part a bit, but it's a bittersweet experience, actually.
Great. Yeah, same thing for me too. It's at the beginning it was really hard to focus and not to think about the virus, think about what's going on out there. But after 3 weeks, everything became normal. Yeah. So let's talk about your background.
Okay.
So you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Michael Okuboyejo. I am a software engineer living and working here in Berlin, Germany. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. So Lagos is a really populous and popular part of Nigeria in West Africa. I studied electrical and electronics engineering at a university called Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. I mean, that's pretty much where my, a pretty interesting part of where my tech story began. I studied electrical engineering, as I said, and I had a lot of interest basically in technology even beforehand, but I didn't quite know what technology entailed. I didn't quite know what made up all the popular softwares back then, and games and viruses and websites. I didn't understand what it was, so I wasn't really exposed, right? But it was in uni that I got really exposed, and pretty much my software engineering career began there. That's pretty much it. I moved to Berlin about almost 2 years ago now, and I've been working with a company called Hellofresh. I work as a backend engineer, which basically means I build, maintain web services, REST APIs, all the stuff that happens behind the scenes for applications, right? And that's pretty much it.
Great. And how have your time been in Germany, working in Germany?
Also a mix of different things. Of course, on one hand, you're far away from a lot of people you know. On the other hand, it's also a good opportunity to be part of the global stage. It's also been a good experience for me in the sense that I got to meet a lot more people. I've built a number of interesting memories and gotten a number of interesting experiences so far. Yeah, it's been great altogether great. It's been interesting. I think interesting is the word that captures it really well. Pretty interesting.
Great. So let's talk about your tech journey. So were you always into tech, or was it a time where you decided to pursue this road, or take this road of software development?
Right. So like I said, I set out to study electrical engineering. What one of the things that really got me in there in the first place was the fact that I used to watch on TV. I really loved robotics and sci-fi movies. So I felt, what is the best way to fulfill this desire, this passion, if you call it. And that just simply seemed to be the course for me. So I got in. However, like I mentioned, I didn't really know anything. So of course I was good with my studies. I was good at math and physics and all that. But actually turning all that theoretical knowledge into something to solve a problem wasn't something I was used to at all. So I remember in my first year, I joined an organization called IEEE. IEEE is Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers. It's a worldwide organization. It's pretty big, and they are behind a lot of the standards in computing and even in technology at large. And they had student branches, so I joined the student branch on campus. Then I remember my first time attending a general. We called it General Assemblies. So I remember the first time I attended a meetup then, and the speaker came and was talking about viruses and networking and security, and I just asking questions. What is a virus? What is a program? And and I remember quite vividly, the speaker then said, look, he just pointed me to the head of the organization and said, look, this guy has too many questions, just deal with him afterwards. And that was where I met that was pretty much where it began, the questions, the drive to know more, and all. So it was from there I built relationships and got opportunities to really, really learn, of course, and also teach others. It was a mix of everything for me, really, and that was where it started. So I started learning how to write code in my first year, the break between first and second year. I started out with Java. Interesting choice for my first language, and I remember it took me a long time to get Hello World to work. So I got a laptop. My uncle got me a laptop. Just my first, like I said, first break between first and second year, and I got this book from the person I met. That was the head of the organization. Then he was in his fifth year. I was my first year. I got this book called Delta, how to program in Java. It's a huge book. And pretty much started out then. Second year, there's a break between second year and third year. And in engineering schools in Nigeria, we have this scheme where from second year, third year, fourth year, you take apart some time to gain industrial experience. So for second year, you stay back on campus for a month or so, about a month, I think. You work on projects. Basically, the idea is just to bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and actual, problem solving skills. So my second year, actually, I attended a boot camp on campus. It was a software engineering boot camp, and I along with a number of other students and colleagues, we learned how to program in Java ME. That was the OS then that used to run on those popular Nokia phones then. So we learned how to build Java ME apps, and then Android was just becoming a thing then. So we also built Android applications, and I learned a bit of PHP then. And fast forward to third year, my break in between third year and fourth year also, worked with a lecturer. He was he wanted to build. He was really passionate about electronics, and even from the way he taught, he was one of those lecturers that really, really did cool stuff. So I worked with him, and then I worked on some microelectronics for him and all. Then fourth year, the plan is that for engineering students, the whole part of your second semester you spend outside.
Okay, can I interrupt? So are you talking about the boot camp, or are you've already done the boot camp? Or
yeah, done the boot camp.
Okay, because I was kind of lost, because I was thinking,
my bad,
fourth year in the boot camp. What?
So the boot camp ended. So the boot camp was, I think, for about 4 weeks.
Okay, that
right,
was 4
in
weeks,
the second year.
Okay.
So it was a 4 weeks. Then started out with basics in Java, knowing how to do some basic data structures and algorithms in Java. Then moved on to Java ME apps for 1 week. Then we did Android, just a little bit of both.
So after the boot camp, you still then went to college for computer science?
No. So I studied electrical engineering.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
Okay, because you were talking about in electrical engineering, you don't do software development, right?
No, we do not.
You do not. Okay.
We do not actually. However, there is a branch of electrical engineering called digital electronics, and part of one of the things we also do is we also did a lot with microcomputers. So we had all these chips, and you were meant to burn code onto. So these chips, you were basically the idea was you would write in C or sometimes even in C++, right? You had programmers. You actually had devices called programmers, right, that would take the code you write on your computer and burn it onto a chip, a microchip, and that microchip will do pretty much anything, all these automation projects and all. So that was part of what we did. So talking about now, I remember the fact that, in school then I was doing a lot of software engineering, and however I was in school to study electrical engineering. So there was this dilemma, right? How do I reconcile what I was passionate about with what I was learning? So cool stuff for me was the fact that I around that time, we began to, there was the influx of Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. So I just thought it was really cool that I could write an Android application that would communicate with with a device via Bluetooth. I could write an Android application or a web application that will communicate with another device over the internet, right? And so I got my hands on cool stuff like that. Then that was like third year, and fourth year, of course, I went for my, the whole of, like I was saying, the whole of second semester and fourth year in engineering school. In most engineering schools in Nigeria, you spend the whole of second year in the industry. Right, so it's called industrial attachment. So instead of going to like a power plant or a fabrication company, I thought, right, I would go to a software engineering company called Terragon Group then. So I joined them and I did a lot of interesting stuff for them. Then that pretty much was it.
Great.
I forgot to mention the part that the part that meetups and relationships played.
Yeah. So it all started in a meetup, right?
It started in a
meetup. So talking about meetups, how is the current, or maybe during your time, maybe you cannot say much about now. So during your time in Nigeria, how was the current state of software development? Because right now I have been seeing a lot of positive news from Nigeria. People are getting into coding, getting to software development. There are boot camps, there are meetups, conferences, and it's just let's say booming. And it's great. So how was it in your time? Was it also like that? Or
yes, it was. Yes, it was. In fact, the best way to describe it is, it has always been, meetups have always been kind of like this ripple effect, right? So someone gets introduced to something, someone is doing something cool, he talks about it somewhere, it sparks the interest of 10, 15 other people, right? They continue it, and then the thing keeps going on and on and on, and the reach spreads far across. So yeah, it was pretty much that. I remember, right, we had these general assemblies, and then we would not only focus on software engineering, and then we'll focus on other parts of technology. We'll talk about communication, artificial intelligence, and all that, right? But we'll just basically talk about, the idea was just, we'll come talk about it, try to practice some things, after school. Instead of going home, many of us stay back, sleep in the laboratories, just churning out code, working on personal projects.
You were sleeping in the labs?
Yeah, in the laboratory.
Were you allowed to do that?
In some, yes. Some, yes.
Okay.
Some were. I mean, by sleeping in the lab, of course, working there overnight.
Okay.
And sleeping early in the morning there. It was. Looking back, of course, I wouldn't want to do that. I love the comfort of my bed, but looking back at it now, it was just out of passion.
Okay, sure.
We're just really passionate about what we're doing, and I know, so. Like I said, the ripple effect, relationships also really did help. I remember we had this thing in school in IEEE called IEEE Extreme, and it was a hackathon where it was a yearly hackathon worldwide, where for 24 hours you get computer programming problems. So basically you have to solve problems, and basically we're using platforms like HackerRank, I think HackerRank mostly, and all of that, Interview Street at some point. I think the Interview Street was one of the first platforms we used. Basically, so you get programming problems, and then you could submit solutions in either Java, whatever languages, people mostly Java, C# and Python then. And it was a fun experience because for 24 hours, people would write code, some would sleep off, would take coffee. It was basically just, for most of us then, those were the times that actually built and formed us, and also we had opportunities to also give back. I remember in my 5th year, for example, when I was almost about leaving school, I also had the opportunity to team up with a few friends of mine and organize a similar boot camp that also helped kickstart and also contribute in a way to the passion and tech direction some people were already taking. So yeah, it's pretty much that's one thing we can't take away from Nigerian experience. That's why most Nigerian developers somehow know one another from somewhere, right? So I remember I saw this guy in Co-Creation Hub once. I remember this guy and I attended something then, because it was meetups is one thing that we can't really take away from the boom, like you mentioned. I think another thing that's also really, really helping is the fact that we're having a lot of more successful startups coming up, So I mean, I will always respect the likes of the Paystacks, Konga, Kudi, folks that were able to solve local problems, right? Hire talent. And that's the thing about engineering, right? You hire talent, you give talent enough problems, enough motivation, right? And then talent definitely will increase in experience, in skills and skill level and all that. And that's, I mean, those are two things I really, really, really look back and I'm really thankful for. Yeah.
Great.
Those meetups, the hackathons, the relationships, and of course what the startups are doing.
Great. Right. So while branching to software development, were you facing any difficulties, or did everything always made sense to you and you were just like sliding through different programming language and
it wasn't.
Through different concepts?
Of course. I mean, that's the thing about looking at things in retrospect, right? It seems like it was all fun, but actually thinking through it wasn't all fun. It was a mix of a lot of stuff. It was a lot of mistakes, also a lot of learning experiences. I remember, not having to find ways to get, not having the best computers around, not having power at times or having electricity, things like that I take for granted now, internet access, for example, I didn't have that so much then, but that's actually one thing. Of course, programming itself can be pretty hard, especially when you are not taught in school, right? If you are taught in school, it's hard. It's hard already if you're taught in school, right? But if you actually are not taught at all, right, then you have to pick it up on your own. Yes, it's really hard.
And which learning resources were you guys using in Nigeria? Were you having like was it books, or were you having like video materials? Anything that was helping you to
I can speak for myself. I know a lot of other people. I know a lot of other developers that started at different times. Different stuff works for them. For me, I started out with a book, and a huge part of the book didn't make much sense. But the fact that I always had people, to reach out
move
to.
Closer to the microphone. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying, I can speak for myself. A lot of other people had, different resources they used. For me, I used books. A lot of what I read didn't make much sense, but I had a lot of people around that was able to always ping and reach out to. Is it okay if I mention names?
I think if there's no problem with that. If you
it's no news.
Yeah, people in Nigeria or people who are
people
in tech.
Yeah, people in tech. Yeah, who helped. So I remember I had the likes of Shegun Famisa, Shayo Oladeji, Okpe Fagoimbo, people like that who always reach out to.
Those names doesn't tell me anything, so
yeah, sure, it's fine.
I don't know them, so
it's fine.
So those are people who are very well known in the tech industry in Nigeria.
I don't know if they're well known to me. I don't know if for others, but for me, they were like huge addition on campus. Then I remember there was also an initiative. Another thing we also had going well for us in OAU then was you also had alumni that had a lot of experience that found ways to pay it forward. So they found ways to give back, and that's really one thing I can't stress enough. So for example, there was an initiative then called iCube, started by someone, he used to work for Nokia. It was in the US, so he found ways to mentor people, right? And that really did. So it's like I said, it's like a ripple effect. Someone gets it, someone passes it on one way or the other, right? You also had there was also an initiative called Mentors International or Mentorship International, right? Someone also was working in Google, a previous student who was an alumnus of the university. He used that as an opportunity to mentor people, giving them like real life projects, and that's one of the things that fast track people's learnings. So books for me, people very much. I didn't have, like I mentioned, I didn't have so much internet access. Like I didn't have this this amazing internet. So I had people to reach out to. I had times where I would hit my head on the wall trying to get stuff to work. But eventually, of course, there were people I was able to reach out to, and they helped. The power of a community, basically, it takes a village to raise someone.
Great. And when did you switch to Hellofresh? So you were in Nigeria and someone called you, you got an email, and someone said, hey, take the next flight to Germany. And
it's not exactly like that. Right. So after school, I worked, I was my second job after school, I worked with a company called I had not even finished school then. So I worked at a company called Kudi, right? So that's one of the things I even want to still point out, which is power of relationship. So the person that reached out to me was the co-founder of Kudi, was the CTO. Then he was the person I had met in school that I mentioned. He was in his fifth year, it was my first year, and then he sort of helped kickstart stuff. So he just reached out saying, hey, Michael, what's going on? What are you doing now? Like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. He said he needed someone to help, with his backend, because he was writing backend for Kudi. Then Kudi is a payment company. Then it was also a payment company, but they were focused on chatbots. And because he had some experience in AI, so he was building, chatbots. So he said he needed someone with the backend. And then I was still messing around with Android then. So he said, since I was writing Java, just help me look at the backend, right? And I said, okay. So I joined, and that was for me like one of the best decisions I made, basically, because I had the opportunity to learn a lot. I met great people, and I worked on actually a lot of interesting stuff. I was able to build a lot. It was a startup, a startup. We didn't really know our way around it for a lot of the time, but we just kept on working and churning out stuff, and those are the things that just helped. And it got to a point where I felt it was time to move on, and then the company had grown, and they were raising Series A, and it was just cool stuff going on. And I felt, look, this is I just personally felt it was time to seek for another experience. So I applied online. Basically, I actually just saw the Hellofresh career opportunity on Stack Overflow, and I applied and did interviews, and I think fast forward, here am I today, basically.
Great.
But yeah, pretty much that.
And when you started at Hellofresh, were you familiar with, let's say, with the tasks they gave to you?
Okay.
Were you already familiar? You saw the code base, and you were like, oh yeah, everything makes sense. I can do it with ease. Or were you like, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? How was it?
It was a mix of both, actually.
Yeah.
So like I said, so for example, on my first, my first day, or maybe the first week, I was able to make a deployment, right? I was hired as a backend engineer to work on Golang, and then the team I joined, they were rebuilding a service in Golang. So I was able to make contribution from my first day, basically. Like from the first day I was onboarded, I was able to make contributions. However, of course, along the way, I began to think, oh wait, what am I doing here? Right? But it's a mix of both, really. And one of the things I've learned so far is there really isn't going to, if you are in a place where all you're working on is something you can do in your sleep, and it's nothing interesting or it's nothing challenging, right? Something that makes you think, then maybe you should rethink actually what you're doing. So it's good to have a mix up, but it's good to have opportunities where you can actually, where you don't feel completely out of your league, right? And it's also good to find yourself in a place where okay, I know I'm here because I could do this, but what's required from me is a lot more than I know. So I think I want to learn more, and I want be willing to apply. So it was for me a mix of both.
Oh, talking about Golang, you were already learning Golang in Nigeria?
Yes, I was.
And how you already knew enough to apply what you've learned in Nigeria.
Yes.
Wow, great. So Golang is like for use for backend task, right? As far as I know.
Yeah, mostly for
heard about Kubernetes and Dockers and all this stuff. This environment is mostly used with Golang as a program language. So, is it something you would? Is it a program language you would tell someone who wants to start programming to start with Golang, or do you think since it's back-end related, it's maybe a little bit too complex, too sophisticated at the beginning, and just start with the basic stuff first, then later you can jump into Golang
Right. So I remember in school, my lecturer once said, the best answer to every question is it depends. So looking back at how I started with Java, right? If I were to, one of the best advice you can get actually is probably start with a simpler language, a language that abstracts, a lot of all the low level operation, so maybe start with something like JavaScript. It's powerful enough for you to do cool stuff, but then it also like makes the barrier of entry really low so that you can lowers the barrier of entry so that you can learn. At this point, I think, to be honest, I don't think there is a perfect language for beginners, right? If you are willing to give it what it takes, if you learn a language that makes it really simple to learn programming, eventually, right, you will still have to pick up all the things you missed along the way, right? It doesn't absolve you of that. You will still have to learn it at some point. So it's okay if you pick up Golang. I have my preferences, however.
So your top 3 program languages?
Okay. So I'm sorry to the Golang community if this feels like I'm betraying you, but my top 2 programming languages, and the programming languages I would advise people if you want to start out to learn. I think number 1 on my list is JavaScript.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also recommend JavaScript. I know people were like, "Yeah, you're an iOS developer. Why not recommending Swift?" Right. So I would always recommend JavaScript.
And the only reason why, 2 reasons actually. One, it's pretty easy to learn. Second reason also is the fact that you get to do a lot more stuff with JavaScript, right? There are a number of interesting applications for JavaScript, right? You can learn, you can pretty much be a full stack engineer when you learn, JavaScript, and you pick up the HTML and CSS. You can learn also how to build backend applications. You can learn front-end applications. I know a number of teams, for example, in my company, there's a team that uses JavaScript for mobile applications, right? For cross-platform mobile applications, and it works really well. I know there are a number of teams also that do that. So JavaScript is a really good language, right? And it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere anytime soon. It's pretty powerful. I would also advise people to learn Python. If learn Python. Why? It's also pretty easy to learn. It's also very powerful. You can build backend applications. I can give names of a number of great startups that started out with Python. Instagram, for example, even till today, they still have a good part of their backend in Python, right? Using Django, the framework. So you can build you can build backend applications in Python. You can also build system level applications in Python. It's abstract, some basic programming concepts for you, right? You can also build, if you are the robotics person, if you are interested in artificial intelligence and machine learning, Python is one of the go-to languages for that part of engineering. So that part of computer science, basically. And then finally, I'll still learn Golang. I'm sorry if it feels like Golang is my number 3, but it's pretty cool also, pretty powerful. It doesn't abstract so much. However, it's dynamic enough to be simple also for people to learn. So it's good to learn. I've heard people call Golang the modern C++ or the C++ of the web. Modern C++ in the sense that they don't bore you. It doesn't bore you with so much operating system concepts. However, there are some things you still need to know to get it to work anyway. But it gives you a good. I think it has a right balance. However, most people use it for backend applications, which is basically microservices. It's a huge deal for microservices. In my opinion, it's one of those languages that is ideal for a service-oriented architecture, for a microservice architecture. It's also pretty useful for operating system level applications. For example, Kubernetes is written in Golang, which you just mentioned. And Kubernetes is a huge deal written in Golang. A lot of this, you can also build command line applications, right? Command line tools. A lot of command line tools are written in Golang also. So yeah, pretty powerful stuff.
Great.
Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, thank you. And apart from the technical part of software developer, backend developer, which kind of, let's say, which soft skills or which kind of mindset do you need for you to become a backend developer?
I think even beyond backend engineering, software engineering in general, one thing I think is most important, and I think we should really emphasize, is learning how to solve problems, right? Having the mindset of knowing how to solve problems, knowing how to debug when something doesn't go the way you expect it to, knowing how to search and figure out why, how, right? It works. Why does it work? Do you know why it works? Or it doesn't work. Do you know why it doesn't work? Right. I think that's one thing, just knowing how to solve problems, knowing how to stay on something, ask the right questions, poke around, make intelligent guesses. That's one huge thing. Mindset. Then going down to something that's not so technical, soft skills. I will say communication is one thing that I think should be really emphasized. I worked in the thing about these skills is, if you miss it at some point, you will still have to learn it someday. So I worked in a really small team at some point. I worked in a team where we didn't have, so much. We weren't so agile. We didn't use many of these agile methodologies. We didn't have product managers. We didn't have product owners. So we didn't have QA. So you would write it, you would talk about it during stand-up, and then you would do it, and then we believe it's done. Basically, we didn't have so much documentation. But of course, moving to a larger team, a team that had much more stuff going on, a team that was pretty much international, these things matter. I remember one of my first few tasks when I joined was, to improve the logs for this service, right? Make the logs more readable, because you realize that things can go wrong at some point, and the logs you write, documentation you write will be the difference between solving the problem at a faster time and spending the whole day on something, right? Helping people figure stuff out. So documentation is another thing. Communication, knowing how to communicate technical concepts so that you do not scare people, right? You don't scare people away. You don't scare non-technical people. You don't make them bored. You don't make them slip off while you're talking about what's going on. At the same time, also educating people. Communication is another thing. I think empathy is another thing also. It is possible for engineers to get so caught up in their work, right, that they do not know how to communicate with people. They do not know communicate with people right. They don't know how to deal with other people. So, for example, I don't know if people might be familiar with this, but then you have weird comments on your pull request. Some can be abusive, some can be far from objective and all that. Knowing how to put things right, knowing how to communicate properly to people, such that you're not condescending, and at the same time you are not, you are, as much as people are learning, knowing how to give feedback is one thing I had to learn also along the way. Knowing how to give and receive feedback. Feedback is essential for growth and all that. So those are the top ones that come to mind, basically.
Great points. Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully someone watching this who wants to become a backend developer have learned from this podcast and can also share it.
advice and some resources if I had any.
I forgot to mention that. We talked about, you said books and
so I stumbled on, I remember that I stumbled on this channel on YouTube a while ago. It's called Missing Semester. It's the MIT folks basically that handle it. So Missing Semester, and then there's this CS50. I think it's Stanford or Harvard.
Yeah.
The Missing Semester anyway, so they have this hour-long
videos.
Videos.
Yeah, I've also looked into some of their videos, and they're really, really good.
Really good. Really good. I think they try to bridge the gap between it's like a crash course actually in modern software engineering things that you don't maybe know, you do not talk about in school. So I watched one over the weekend on Git. They went not too low level, but then they also explained how it worked under the hood, which is something that I think is powerful.
All right, so that's CS50.
No, missing semester and CS50.
CS50. All right, so I'm going to add that also.
Awesome.
To the description.
Awesome.
All right, do we have anything else?
I thinking about advice. Speaking of advice, to give, I think two things come to mind. One being that it is important to have an idea of of your purpose as an engineer, basically. So the only reason why you'll be hired as an engineer is to solve problems, right? So if it's to solve problems that will pay the salary, that will keep the company running, right? So it's not so much about the skills, even though the skills are needed and all that. It's about solving problems, really. So at times it's possible for engineers to get caught up in our ideal world where we just want to work on laser cutting technology and all that. But if the technology we're working on doesn't bring money to the table for the companies, right? And of course, I'm not saying we should just be looking for money, trying to make money and all that. But in the end, it's about, actually solving problems for people. So one of the things I've learned so far is at times we tend to overcomplicate, and overcomplicate is actually exaggeration, but we tend to complicate solutions, right? If as weird as this may sound, if Google Sheets is the solution to this problem, let's use Google Sheets. There's really no point building a whole API and putting it on Kubernetes right? In the end, it's about finding simple solutions to problems, right? So that's one thing. I think the other thing is, the fact that we shouldn't, also goes along the line of, not emphasizing so much on the skills at the expense of soft skills, at the expense of business knowledge, at the expense of domain knowledge also. All those are pretty much important. And, tech is pretty much open to everyone. So it goes beyond just software engineers. There are a lot of non-technical people that you need on your team. They don't write code with you, but their impact and input is, really, really valued. UI, UX researchers and people, product owners, product managers, project managers, stakeholders, and all that. That to be honest, they are the reason why we are where we are, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to add that to the video.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.